Well, good morning from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar and interim rector here, and it's a joy and delight, whether you're joining us here in person on Park Avenue or online at stbarts.org, to welcome you to the forum. Each week here, we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And in this season of Lent and in this season of transition for us as a parish community, we've been hearing some wisdom from members of our own community about transition and how to make our way through that. And we've had a great 3 weeks so far. This week, on the fourth week, our last two sessions are gonna focus on groups that are held within the St. Bart's community, both of which are co-led by my colleague, the Reverend Meredith Ward, our Senior Associate Rector. So I'm gonna turn it over to her now to introduce our other guests.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be with you this morning, and I'm delighted to have with us Ray Vandenberg and Bob Kiley, who are lay leaders at St. Bart's, and also with me co-conveners, I would say, how we phrase it, of the group for retirement, people thinking about retirement. It's called Retirement, Transition, and Purpose. So it's most appropriate for Peter's series of forums on transition. And it's a particularly potentially fraught a time of transition in people's lives. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the group, about what goes on in the group, some of the themes of retirement that have come up for people in the group, and I'm going to invite Ray and Bob also to share a little bit of their wisdom. They have both experienced retirement more than once, actually, and so we're going to hear from them and hear what wisdom they have to share. So just to begin, I would like to share with you a prayer that we open all of our meetings with, because it touches on some of the themes that seem to be recurring in our conversations in the group. And it goes like this: To everything, Lord, you have given a season, calling each thing good in its time. In the years of our lives, you call us to work, you ask us to play, you command us to rest, and by your grace you weave our days together in peace. We pray for the members of this group who have come or are coming to the end of their season of work. Thank you for friends made, challenges met, and growth enjoyed, and for all we have learned and accomplished. Help us to let the old work go, to take up the new life for which you have also given us gifts, through Christ, the worker in whose love is our eternal rest and joy. Amen.
Amen.
So the group is open to anyone who is either thinking about retirement a couple of years hence, thinking ahead to what that's going to be like for people who have just retired, literally like yesterday, and also to people who have been retired for a number of years, even many years, and are maybe hitting a fork in the road that they want to explore and share with others. So this group is a wonderful way to get wisdom from the group and support from each other. And we're finding it an amazing experience. So the prayer I just read talks about the seasons of our lives. And it paraphrases that very famous passage from Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season. The prayer talks about God's seasons and each thing being good in its time. So I wonder if you could each start off by telling us your experience of retirement, the seasons of your lives, and how you decided it was time to retire.
Well, that's a big question. Let me start by saying...
Your mic's on? Mic is on?
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I think what I would say is that when we look back on your life, and I'm 77 now, so I'm looking back on many phases of my life, and I think that's what the prayer talks about and what seasons of life are. I mean, there's youth, there's education, there's early marriage, there's children, and retirement is just one more phase of life. It's not something that is a big barrier or something that you have to sort of force your way through or really be afraid of. In my case, my retirement sort of started around when I was 65, and was sort of like the traditional age when you begin to think of such things. You know, I signed up for Medicare and all of that kind of stuff. And, but I was the head of a small law firm with about 20 or 30 employees, and I was concerned that I would, if I just stopped, that there would be difficulties for a lot of people who I was working with, and I had worked with for a long time. So I began to plan for the future, and I was thinking probably sort of 75-ish I might quit, because it might take as long as 10 years to kind of phase out. So what I started to do was talk to, I was a lawyer, so I was talking to other law firms about possibly merging or doing something so I could create a new platform for the other people to work. But then it got speeded up a little bit because of some personal problems I was having in my personal life with my marriage, who was the mother of my children, and so on, and also the fact that a potential merger partner came along. So it speeded up. Instead of 75, I retired when I was 71 because things just happened a little bit faster than I expected. And everybody was in good shape. Anybody who wanted to join the new firm was invited to join, and so I didn't have to worry about that aspect of it. But the thing that really triggered the early retirement was that about a year and a half or so after my former wife and I had split up, I met my current wife. Now, we didn't get married, and we didn't know each other beforehand. That was not part of the background of the whole thing. But we had met, and I had, reached a point where I thought, I'll not get married again. I'm not going to do that. But we just gelled, and in order for our life to go forward together, it was better for me not to work. So I just, finished at age 71 instead of 75, which was what I had projected to do. So that's kind of the story.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, reflecting on seasons of life, I was approaching my 60th birthday, which was when my pension would be available to me. I had been for 22 years prior the chief executive officer of a hospital up in Connecticut. And I was very concerned about succession planning and, much as Ray just indicated, leaving the hospital in as good shape as I possibly could. So I began to think about it, and I actually engaged a coach to work with me and my team to help us strategize about how this transition could be made smooth. I had identified an internal successor, and so for about a year we worked together with this coach, and I actually spent private time with the coach helping me strategize about retirement. I was young, and I did not have a firm idea of what lied ahead, but one of the things this coach said to me was, keep yourself open to all possibilities. And that has been something that has stuck with me for the last, now it's been 14 years, keeping myself open to all possibilities. So the retirement date came, and I did not have a firm plan in mind, and I was just going to take it easy and see what possibilities might open up. Totally out of the blue, I got a call from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore asking me if I wanted to take a 3-year assignment with them running their hospital in Istanbul, Turkey. And, open to all possibilities. I looked into it, and the more I looked into it, the more excited I became. Everybody told me not to do it, my kids, my neighbors, my friends, but I went ahead and did it, and I have to say it was one of the best seasons of my life, and I'm so glad that I did it. So I flunked retirement once, and then when the 3-year period was over, I flunked it a second time because I was retired, so I thought, for a couple months, and Hopkins calls again and said, would I go to Abu Dhabi for 18 months? So I said, well, why not? So I went to Abu Dhabi for 18 months. The desert heat killed me, and that was when I decided, okay, Bob, you're done, and I retired.
You both made a plan, or you at least started out with a plan. You gave it some forethought. Ray, in your case, you had a 10-year runway in your mind. Bob, you hired a coach. You were thinking about transitions not only for yourselves, but for your companies. And then those plans, changed. Now, making a plan in retirement isn't always possible for everyone. Sometimes it gets thrust upon you if someone says you are taking early retirement. And very often the plans that we make, just other things come up and the plans just can't be implemented. And you both were able to kind of pivot and make those changes. But what advice would you give to people who about either making a plan or not making a plan, or making a plan and having the plan go awry?
Well, I think it's always important to make a plan. Obviously, and we don't get into this in the group at all about financial planning, but so that is obviously something that you have to take into account. But I think, as Bob was saying, being open to all possibilities, you have to let that plan be flexible. And, just like any other phase of your life, I mean, you may be in the middle of your working career and an opportunity comes along, or something changes in your work situation, and whatever you were planning to do just isn't what ends up happening. And I think that's the same in retirement. And in my case, the plan changed. It sort of got accelerated. The retirement got accelerated because I fell in love, and I met somebody, and we wanted to have a life together, and I wanted to blend my life in with hers, and so, I luckily had put a plan in place, and it was just had to be tweaked a bit in order to make that possible for myself.
And I learned that good planning is always a good idea, but sometimes the totally unexpected happens. And in my case, sadly, my wife died when we were both 46. So we had planned our lives. We had 2 children, one was 11 and one was 14. And all of the planning that we had done went out the window. And so I learned the hard way that plans have to be revised and rethought. And I think that applies to retirement as well. I think it's important to plan because you don't want that period of wandering in the desert, for lack of a better word, and yet to overplan, it often doesn't work out. So the flexibility and the recognition that this is an uncharted period in your life, and to a degree, you go with the flow, but it's great if the flow has a broad horizon as to where you might want to land up. And that's my feeling about planning.
So you, Bob, quote unquote, retired, and then you went back to work for a couple of times. But when you really retire, you're sometimes asked to come back into your former field, and you both have decades of experience in your fields in the law and in hospital administration. Those are areas of expertise that I would imagine are in demand in certain quarters, both privately and corporately. And sometimes with that kind of experience and expertise, you are asked to do things in retirement, drawn back into your former profession, which is a great gift to be able to offer, but there are also some pitfalls with that. So can you talk about what your experience is, sort of applying your experience and expertise to situations in retirement on a volunteer basis, And what are some of the, how has that worked for you? What are some of the pitfalls and what are some of the joys of offering that?
You want to start?
Okay. As I just said, I was privileged to spend my whole career in hospitals. And one of the great joys of that was not only working with the staff, but very importantly, interacting with patients. And on a daily basis, I would visit patients. I'd been in my position for 20 some odd years, so I got to know a lot of people in the community. So I really enjoyed going and talking with patients. So when I retired, I thought, well, the logical thing is to go volunteer. So I went to volunteer at one of the major academic medical centers here in the emergency room. I asked that no one be told what I had done for a living, and I did very high-tech work. I scrubbed stretchers and moved beds and got supplies. And initially I enjoyed it, but I found after about 18 months that it was really dragging me down because I wasn't able to fix the problems that I saw. And it wasn't my job to rearrange the deck chairs, but when I was confronted with things that really upset me, I said, I just can't do this anymore. So I stepped aside from that. A great joy is being a member of the Pastoral Care Task Force here at St. Bart's, because with Meredith's leadership, we're given a list of folks who might enjoy a visit, a call, etc. And I've really embraced that, and I've gotten to know so many wonderful people in this community. And going and visiting in a hospital is something I'm exquisitely comfortable with. So it's a gift that I can provide, and I really enjoy it. So that has been a wonderful, nice factor in my retirement.
Being a lawyer, I'm sort of not quite as often pulled aside like doctors are, to hear people's problems, but I do get called on quite a bit to offer some, off-the-hand advice, off-the-cuff advice, I guess I should say. But one of the things that I've found is that, after not working, not having to get up every day and go to court for a particular deadline or work on a brief or what have you, or even just because I was running a law firm dealing with the day-to-day business of running the law firm, I was able to offer more of my time and my energy to doing things that were not strictly legal, but called on a lot of the expertise that I had. And one of the things I'm doing is serving on the vestry and being a warden here at St. Bart's, which is time-consuming, highly challenging, very interesting, gets me a chance to work with good people. And I get actually quite often called on to sort of give a legal perspective on things that are coming up. I'm not the lawyer for the church, but I can sort of guide things in the right direction. So that's been quite satisfying. Also, I should mention that when I left my firm, formally left my firm, I kept about 5 or 6 matters that the clients wanted me to continue to work on, and one of which was for the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, because I had gotten started in some litigation on behalf of the church prior to leaving my firm, and he asked me to stay on and handle that as an individual lawyer going forward. So that really kept me busy for about 2 years after I, quote, retired. And that was not pro bono, that was for pay, so I was actually being compensated for that, which was nice, although I was able to reduce my rate by about 50%, which he liked as well.
Wow. So you've talked about working in retirement in using the expertise that you bring after all those decades of experience. What about, Bob, you talked about being open to new possibilities and going in a totally different direction. Have you had opportunities? I mean, you mentioned the pastoral care group. What are some other ways that you've found to kind of expand your horizons?
Well, joining St. Bart's was really the best first move I made in retirement because it opened me up to a wonderful community. I was born in New York City, raised here, but lived outside of the city for many years. I had an apartment here, but I was never able to use it. So I really didn't have any friends here. All of my friends currently are from St. Bart's. One of the first things that attracted me was Crossroads Community Services. It was an arena that I had never had any experience with, so I signed up for volunteering in the food pantry every Thursday, and that has become a critically important part of my life, not only getting to know our guests, but working with a cadre of wonderful volunteers, many of whom have become personal friends. A second arena that opened up to me, I love to go to Carnegie Hall, and one day I was sitting waiting for the performance to begin, and there was a little blurb in the playbill that said Carnegie Hall was looking for volunteers. So I called the number, and before I knew it, I had gone through 6 months of training as a tour guide in Carnegie Hall. So I give tours every Tuesday, and then frequently asked to fill in for other people. And that has just been wonderful for me. I knew nothing about Carnegie Hall, knew nothing about the architecture, the history, and I really enjoy it. And then finally, probably my most high-skilled retirement job was, I'm an usher, and I was getting ready to pass the plates, and Willie, our wonderful custodian, said to me, "Oh, the plates are such a mess." And then he explained that a longtime volunteer here had polished the plates. And I thought, well, I could probably polish plates. So I've started polishing the plates. Now, don't look today because I haven't, I haven't been there, but I'm going to give them a real buffing for Easter.
I love that.
I would just say that one of the things, we were talking about a lot of, like volunteering to do this and that and so on. One of the things that I've found that I've gotten to like to do is photography, which I'd never done before, but I had been taking pictures around New York City, and it's really easy, with the phone, and the cameras are fantastic, and maybe I'll get an even better one. But I've been taking pictures around New York, and people said, you know what, you ought to open an Instagram account and post those, because people would like to see those. And I think Flora likes them. I see her sitting over there. She likes them once in a while. So I have, I don't know, maybe 100 or so, or 150 pictures that, I just keep my eyes opened all the time. And if I see something that's interesting, I'll take a picture of it and post it on Instagram. That's, kind of a new thing, and I'd never really had time or sort of even thought about it before.
Right. That's wonderful. I didn't even know that, Ray.
Nor did I.
We're gonna be checking you out on Instagram.
All right, maybe I'll get some more likes.
Maybe we'll do a show. Maybe we'll have a little show here. You talked about not having the time when you were working, and time management is one of the big things that we talk about in the group, because all of a sudden your days are not filled up with showing up to work. You have a whole day and night in front of you to do whatever you want, which sounds great, and it's also kind of daunting. Like, what am I going to do with myself now? What will I do? You two don't seem to have a problem filling up the hours of your days, but some people do, and also I think it takes some time to figure out what it is that you want to do, not that you must do, but that you want to do, and finding a good fit. And in that transition, some people have found that they just fill up all the hours with because they're almost so anxious about not having anything to do that they do everything that comes to them. And then they're kind of overloaded. So how do you sort of think about your time sort of hour by hour during the day, and how you kind of balance that out? And Bob, I know you have a particular gift for filling up the hours of your day. So,
Well, you know, when I was working, I was also pretty compulsive about going to the gym. So I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, go to the gym, do my thing, and be at the hospital by 7. So one of the great joys for me is being able to read both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times first thing in the morning. So building in that time that just is pure pleasure is very important. But having structured commitments, I find, really is beneficial. And without overscheduling, you leave yourself open for crisis situations. If I get a call from Meredith that somebody is in the hospital, I'm fortunate. I can drop what I'm doing and go. So really keeping that balance between some structured activities, and then we're privileged to live in New York. I mean, let's face it. So there's never a shortage of anything to do in New York, but it's just really making sure that you're not on that hamster wheel once again.
Right.
Yeah. I think the thing is, and we hear this a lot from people in the group, there's about, I guess, 12 to 16 that sort of show up every month on Zoom, is not to feel guilty. I mean, a friend of mine in California who's just recently retired said, you know what, retirement is like waking up on Saturday morning. You don't have to go anywhere. You know, you have your chores to do and so on, but other than that, you've got, you know, things are open up in front of you. And a lot of people are saying in the group, don't feel guilty. I mean, if you want to spend 3 hours reading that book or watching you know, sort of gorging out on a series on Netflix, or taking a long walk, as Bob does, work out, you know, and you know, get yourself physically fit. There's all kinds of things that you can do to keep yourself occupied, but don't feel guilty just feeling that you need to do something for yourself that particular day.
And if I could just add on that, that is such a good point. And when I retired the first time, I have a home in a little village up in Connecticut, and I went for my morning walk the day after I retired, but I went a little later. And I was almost embarrassed. I was afraid people would say, why is this man not working? Why is he out and about? You know? And so get over it and recognize that retirement is in so many ways a great gift.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's almost like you have to really shift the way your brain works. That the hamster wheel that you talk about of just working, whether we love our work or whether we don't love our work or whether we're somewhere in between, but there's this idea that working is our purpose, and that we have no other purpose besides that. And of course, that's simply not true. And retirement offers us this sort of fertile field to figure out what other things we can do, and it sometimes takes time. We talk about in the group what are the things you know, if someone approaches you to go do this or that volunteer thing, or to volunteer your time in some way, what are the things you say yes to, and when is it okay to say no, or that not only when is it okay, but it is okay to say no to things that people ask you to do because you have all this time on your hands. So talk a little bit about that, about saying yes to new possibilities and new ways of exploring your own gifts, but also the way that it's okay to say no if you find this is just not something that's giving you joy.
I think that's a tough question, actually, because my tendency is always to say yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes, since I do have a family, and we have actually 2 families now with 5 grown-up kids, all of whom have needs and you know, want to be involved and so on, and I want to be involved in their life, that if I'm doing something voluntarily, there's a funny little difference that it has with the people that you live with than work does. Because when you're working, it's kind of for them, because you're making money and you're helping to support them and you're giving them things that they want. But when you're volunteering, they kind of feel like a little bit resentful, like, going off again on that, another meeting, what is it? What's this all about? I mean, I'm sort of reflecting what I'm hearing this weekend, since I'm here a lot this weekend.
Right.
And so I think, I do have to balance, what I'm doing and say no sometimes. This position on the vestry and being a warden was something I really, really struggled with about 1.5 years ago when Dean approached me, because I had done this a few decades ago, and I knew how much time and effort it was involved. So I spent a lot of time talking to my wife and kids about it, and we decided that I should go ahead with it. It was kind of a group decision. And so I feel less guilty about it these days, but it is important to keep track of what your priorities are.
And I think, I tend to say yes to everything, but my experience working in the emergency room really was eye-opening for me, because it was something that I felt I wanted to do, I should do. It was something that I thought I could do a good job at, but as I indicated earlier, I found that it was just dragging me down. And so saying no and walking away saying, I'm really glad I tried this, I enjoyed certain aspects, but it's just not for me. And again, getting back to the theme of luxury in retirement, you have the luxury to do that. So I encourage people to say yes, but never feel that they're obligated if it is simply not working out for them.
So there was an article in the Times this past week that talked about the pitfalls of retirement, that without a place to show up for work every day and without that sort of built-in social opportunities, that there's a real risk of loneliness and isolation and even cognitive decline. So what you're talking about here are ways to prevent that from happening, but it requires it requires us to just act on our own behalf and build in those places where we are connecting with other people, where we are finding purpose and feeling useful. I think our group is a great place to begin to explore those things. We share a lot of ideas with each other. Do you want to talk about fighting off that sense of sort of uselessness and isolation that we're in danger of?
Sure, and the group has been really wonderful, because people have been very candid, people have been very forthcoming, and there is great dialogue among us. So I think the cognitive decline is something that really worries me. I've observed people go through all sorts of disease processes, and cognitive decline, personally for me, is very, very scary. And so I think the more that you can be engaged, and you define what that engagement is with the outside world, with other people, in service, it's just maybe lowering the risk a bit that you will suffer cognitive decline, and even if not cognitive decline, warding off depression. And that is something that is also on the back of my mind. So I just think, putting the periscope up, looking around and saying, what is it that I can do that is not only going to benefit somebody else, but is really going to benefit me?
I think you can't be too frenetic about it, though.
Right.
You do have to, I think you have to keep some time for yourself, and not just feel like you're going to live forever if you're out there busy all the time. There's nothing wrong with sitting and praying, or sitting and reading a novel that you've always meant to read, or just talking to friends. Go down, when we live in New York City, on a nice day like yesterday, go out to the park and just, enjoy the outdoors. Look at the Hudson River or the East River, wherever you happen to live, and think. Try something new. Try writing a poem. there's lots of ways of keeping your mind working. I do Wordle every night, so before I go to sleep, which I think is going to ward off, all kinds of problems.
We're all going to be geniuses playing Wordle. So I wanted to leave time to open it up for questions from the audience. I think Peter is receiving questions at his email address, right?
Correct. So if you're here in person, you can raise your hand, and Stephanie, I think, is here with question cards. She'll come around and bring one to you and bring them up to us. You can also email me at pthompson@stbarts.org, and if you're joining us online, you can write your questions into the comments on Facebook or the live chat on YouTube. We do have some questions already.
Okay.
The first question is, what do you miss about full-time work, if anything?
As a lawyer, I have to say I really, really enjoyed trials. But they were so exhausting and so time-consuming that there's part of me that doesn't miss it at all. But the excitement of being in a courtroom and not knowing what was going to happen, I felt like maybe like Paolo does when he's conducting the choir. Like I had all these people that were supposed to perform, and I couldn't really control them. I mean, I put a witness on who was fantastic in the conference room when we were, sort of doing a trial run, but he was terrible on the witness stand. It just fell apart. Or the cross-examination was something we hadn't anticipated. So there's always that challenge, that sort of like that edge that you get. So I kind of miss that, the adrenaline, I guess it is.
In my case, it's all about the people. I referenced earlier that I was privileged to visit patients, but despite how well planned my retirement was, I was totally unprepared for my last day when there was a reception in the hospital lobby, and I realized that I would never see most of my fellow employees again. And these were people that I had watched over 22 years, gone through life experiences with, deaths, births, etc. And it really set me back. And I think often about those people, and so I really do miss that part of working.
Okay. Lots of great questions. One person points out that neither of you are wearing neckties. In what other way, this person says, have you found relaxation in retirement?
Well, Ray asked me the other night, was I going to wear a necktie? And I said, only if you tie it.
He was wearing a leather jacket at the time.
Well,
so
what can I tell you? Go ahead, Ray.
No, I mean, obviously you have to wear a necktie when you go to court, but we're around the office. It got casual, as it is now. But one of the nice things about it is I spend most of my time just wearing leisure wear, which is great.
And I always wished that I could be a doctor only for one reason. They could put on scrubs and a white lab coat and look really good. And I didn't have that option.
So this may not apply to either of you, but it may apply to some of the folks in the group. How do folks deal with a spouse or partner that suddenly is having lunch with them every day and isn't used to that?
Well, it doesn't apply to me specifically regarding my spouse, because she does like to spend time with me. But I have heard stories from people in the group whose spouses would sort of like them to go off, do something, get away a little bit. So they're not used to having people around all day long.
One of the best stories I heard in that regard was a fellow who was a senior partner in an accounting firm, and his retirement was mandated, and their home had an internal staircase to an office over their garage, and his wife made them put in a door with an external staircase, so every day she could hand him his lunch and send him upstairs.
Navigating retirement as a couple is a whole other thing, I think, because people retire at different times. Who's going to do what? How do our responsibilities shift? If you're going to be home all the time, does that mean you have to do all the housework, and so that is also a part that we haven't really talked about here, but it's definitely a part of the planning process, I would say, if you are in a partnership.
I would say that, younger people today who are used to remote working since the pandemic already have to cope with that.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
not going to be new for the newer generation that comes along.
Right.
Similarly, it sounds like both of you were in good financial positions when you retired, but not everyone is in a good financial position, and some folks worry about affording retirement. Has that come up in the group at all, and any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of people have shared that one of their greatest fears is not having a paycheck. And, I was fortunate, but that was very much on my mind too, because a paycheck was something we got used to. So I think, as Ray indicated earlier, we don't talk about the financial planning aspects, but it does come up. And it particularly comes up when people are really conflicted about should they or should they not retire.
Yeah, I mean, finances are definitely, obviously, something to think about as you begin thinking about retirement. And as has been said multiple times, we don't offer financial planning advice. We don't talk about that in the group. It's really a spiritually based group, but money is a spiritual thing. It's a part of our lives. So, and it is both a source of comfort and a source of anxiety. So that is how we talk about it, and it's not unlike, my sense is from folks in the group that it's not unlike that gaping space of empty time that confronts you, but that sense that even if you are financially prepared for retirement, the idea of not getting that regular paycheck is a source of anxiety for folks even who have done their financial planning.
One person wonders who wrote the opening prayer, and I'll just add to make things a little more difficult for you, Meredith. What is a good theology of retirement?
So the opening prayer comes from a book that I have upstairs, and I can't remember the author's name, but if you want to send me an email, I will provide it, and or I will provide you with the prayer, the text of the prayer itself. But I think a theology of retirement is sort of, I mean, I don't mean to sound simplistic, but it's the theology of our whole lives. Because as Ray said right at the outset, our lives are filled with transitions, from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, from moving this place, perhaps getting into a relationship, losing people we love. There's constant change in our lives, and so how do we navigate that change, knowing that God is with us throughout, and that God has provided us with gifts in each season of our lives to be whatever it is we are in that season, and if it's being a 5-year-old, or if it's being a college student, or if it's being someone in retirement exploring a whole new field of possibility, we have the gifts inside ourselves. We just need to get in touch with those gifts that God has given us.
All right, I'll fit a few more things in before we stop. Looking around the room, I see several couples who lived in the suburbs and retired to New York. Bob, you did a version of this, although you had an apartment here already. Ray, you were already living in the city. I wonder what you all and what the group maybe has made of this phenomenon, which seems to buck against the traditional trend of folks retiring in New York.
Well, sometimes, as I'm sure the case with all of us, New York can get on your nerves. But I think about what would I be doing in Madison, Connecticut in December, January, and February. So the vibrancy, the vitality, the many things that we're privileged to have, really, I think it's a very understandable phenomenon, and I'm so glad that I'm able to be here.
I would say that of all the places that I've lived, and I have my career here, but I've lived in lots of different places over my years. New York is my favorite. it's just, as I think is probably most of you know since you're here, it's just got that special verve, energy, and it's really, really important, I think, when you're older to have that outside stimulus rather than, being just maybe in a quieter place. That's my sense of it, and I think that probably explains why people tend to gravitate back to New York or come to New York. I mean, you read in the New York Times a lot of times in this real estate section of people that, they've always dreamed of living in New York, and when they finally retire, they sell the house in the suburbs or the house in the country or wherever they lived, and they pull it all together and they can afford a studio apartment in New York. And they're very happy about that.
Someone wonders if you have invited Bishop Dean Wolfe to join the retirement group.
Yes. Yes. I personally extended an invitation to him. I suspect he will not be joining the group, but I did share with him how wonderful people are finding this group and the support that they're finding, and just like bouncing ideas off of each other. What do you think of this? What should I do about that? It's just a really wonderful support for all of the members of the group. We share our cumulative wisdom with each other, and we're all kind of in the same boat. So you suddenly know that you're not alone as you're thinking about these things, as you're wondering what's the next step. In that regard, before, Peter, I don't know if you're going to close us out, but before you do, I just want to say our next meeting is this Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m. So if you're curious at all and you want to know what the group is about, I welcome you. We'd all love to have you join us. We're on Zoom, and the link is on the St. Bart's webpage.
And also, many people don't say anything, in any given session. They just want to listen and hear what other people are talking about. So you don't have to feel like you have to show up and be prepared to talk.
Right.
My final question was, how do folks join the group? So I wonder, Meredith, if you could just tell us a little bit about the forum next week.
Sure. So next week we're going to be talking about another group that we have here with Flora and Keith Reinhardt as my co-leaders. Ray is also in that group, but he's not able to be here. And Keith Reinhardt is going to fill in for him. Grieving as a transition. We're going to be talking about grief and how grief is a transition in life as well. So that is a group that meets on Wednesday evenings, and we'll be talking about that.
As we end, I want to thank Meredith for her leadership in this area. I also want to thank Ray and Bob not only for leading, co-convening this group, but also for the many ways in which they contribute as volunteers to St. Bart's. We are grateful that of your array of volunteer opportunities, that St. Bart's is near the top of the list.
Thank you. Thank you.
We might start a comedy team one day.
So thanks all for being here, whether you're in person or online. We hope you'll stick around and join us for worship at 11 a.m.
What's your Instagram handle, Ray?
I can't remember. I'll have to look.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
Good.
Well,
Thank you.
You
Thank
made
you.
it easy. You made it easy for us. Thank you so much. Hello.
I'm a filmmaker with PBS, and I did the X's 11 retreat last Saturday, and I'm finding it very difficult. And I'm wondering, was your coach helpful? I mean, in terms of educating somebody about what's out there for meaningful volunteering.
Well, he was very helpful in setting my head right to recognize that there would be a lot of opportunities out there and never dismissing anything just out of hand. And so when I got that call from Hopkins, I thought, well, this is pretty crazy, but